Ever wondered what it takes to be part of the most infamous motorcycle club in the world? Yes, I'm talking about Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club. From rules that define their unique brotherhood to a culture where tradition meets defiance.
You're part of our family now, and that means we'll always be here for you.
This video is going to be a special one as I reveal 20 of the most brutal Hell's Angels rules that will blow your mind. Number 1, invite only. If you thought there was a formal process or application to join the Hell's Angels, then you're already mistaken. I'm going to make this as clear as possible. The Hell's Angels are an invite-only club. Even the FAQ section on their official website states that there's absolutely no point in asking to join the elite club of riders. So if it's an invite-only club, how does one get voted in? Well, let's not forget that it's a brotherhood, and at the end of the day, building relationships with existing members goes a long way. Rumor has it that the Hell's Angels actually have special hangout events with invites sent to prospective candidates who might be a good fit for the club. And what's even more interesting is that some of the top aspirants have even come up with a methodology that has the highest chance of helping you get into the club. This is how it goes. After you're invited to the secret hangout, it's advised to build good relationships, helping you become an associate. But don't think it's an easy process. Once you're a prospect, the Hell's Angels watch your every move to make sure you're a good fit, and it's only then that you're officially offered to become a fully patched member. Number 2, official merchandise. The Hell's Angels don't joke around about merchandise either. And before I tell you their brutal rule about the dress code, here's a piece of advice for us civilians. If you ever come across some nice-looking Hell's Angels gear, don't buy it. Even if it's just for Halloween. Members absolutely despise civilians who think they can wear their gear just for the sake of fashion. And if you're a member who ditches the official merchandise and shows up in cheap knockoffs, then get ready for some action. The Hell's Angels aren't shy at all about dishing out retribution, so yeah, despite being the most infamous motorcycle club in the world, they don't tread lightly about how they present themselves to the general public. I'm not sure how true this is, but there are actually stories of bikers getting killed for not wearing their patches even after several warnings. Number 3, no gossip allowed. At first, I'm pretty sure this seems like a rule we can all get behind. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of a group where members don't spill tea about anyone, especially in their absence? But when you realize why this is actually a rule, that's when things start to get much more serious. That means if someone disappears or stops showing up to meetings, no member is allowed to ask or discuss it. But that's not even my main concern here. What scares me about this rule is, where does the member even go? And the fact that no one is allowed to talk about them is kind of fishy. But let's not jump to any conclusions here. You know, like how they say what happens in Vegas.
Yeah, I was wondering about this patch, man. Where'd that patch originate?
Stays in Vegas. So there might as well be a saying about this biker gang as well. What happens at Hell's Angels meetups stays at Hell's Angels meetups. Oh, and of course, there is a punishment if someone is caught discussing a missing member, though. Legend has it, if someone hears you talking about a missing member, you're immediately thrown out of the club. Number 4, one for all for one. Don't pick a fight with anyone wearing a badge. The whole club will declare war and come after you, and this is just the start. Some people actually claim the Hell's Angels even put hits on people who try to hurt the club. They truly live by the motto, one for all for one. So even when they're riding, if one member gets pulled over, the entire squad gets pulled over, and even if there's like 100 of them on the road, doesn't mean the Angel rule doesn't apply to them. Of course, it's natural to think this is nothing but a display of intimidation, but that still doesn't mean they can get away with it. Number 5, never snitch on a brother. Boys will be boys, right? And considering how the Hells Angels love to get naughty, occasionally landing them in trouble with the law, brothers are forbidden to snitch. It doesn't matter what you saw. Drugs, crime, violence, you name it. Brothers are expected to keep their lips sealed, and in case you're wondering what happens if they don't, well, like I mentioned before, they aren't shy when it comes to punishment. Oh, and believe it or not, it's actually because of rules like these that this is an invite-only club. Members run extensive background checks on potential candidates, as no rat is allowed to join the organization. Plus, loyalty is generously rewarded within the club, and with a lot of people out there to get them, this code is super important for their survival. Believe it or not, people have even lost their lives over violating this rule. Number 6. No drugs or funny business. I'm going to be real with you. I know this rule is kind of hard to believe, considering how the Hells Angels don't exactly have a squeaky clean reputation, but it's actually true. What members do in secrecy is something else, but as far as the official rules go, drugs are strictly off limits. And if someone gets caught doing them, they're immediately stripped of their membership. But what happens when a member is caught dealing drugs? Well, losing your membership would sound like a pretty decent punishment in that case, because they often have to pay with their lives. And if you think that's a bit too much, I want you to look at the bigger picture here. Let's face it, the Hells Angels have made trouble their business, and with so many celebrities, members like Rusty Coons and David LaBrava, famous for their reputations, brutal rules like these need to exist. Without them, the club would be blasted for being nothing but an organized group of criminals. Number 7, no public statements. You notice how there's very little known about the mysterious Hells Angels? Well, they've gone to great lengths to keep it that way. No lower-ranked member is allowed to talk to the press, and the best you'll get out of them is no comments. It's only the presidents of chapters who can speak for the club, and when you think about it, it's actually a really smart structure. Haters are literally waiting for a member to slip and say something controversial so they can attack the club. And with so many wannabe members walking around, you never know who to believe. Thanks to this no press policy, even the media knows better than to believe anything coming out of ordinary members. But doesn't that sound a bit odd? For a club that's all about freedom and whatnot, not even being allowed to speak to the press seems extreme. But when you think about it, it's not about limiting freedom, it's actually about their image and safeguarding other members. Number 8, always ride in formation. If you've ever seen the Hells Angels on the road, you probably know how they're super serious about the formation. It's actually like a huge hierarchy on the road. In the front, you have the fearless leader who's leading the massive procession. After that, it's esteemed vice president, followed by the sergeant of arms. There's actually one reason why the procession is so organized. Imagine there are no rules, and it's every man for himself as riders chaotically push their bikes to the limit, jockeying for a higher position. Doesn't sound like the gang, who is pretty particular about the clothing. Plus, when you look at how particular they are about their clothing and everything, it makes sense that they always ride in formation. And of course, breaking the formation has consequences. If a lower-ranked member speeds up and tries getting ahead of the leaders, they'll have their badge stripped away in no time. It's actually a matter of respect, though, because those in the front have served the Hells Angels long and hard to earn their positions. Oh, and if you're ever on the road and see a wave of tough-looking men on bikes approaching, it's best to let them pass to avoid an unnecessary confrontation. Number 9, no cops allowed. While it's super doubtful any cop would want to risk their career and reputation by joining the controversial group, there are things the Charter just won't accept. And being a cop is one of them. Cops, or even prison guards for that matter, are not allowed to become a part of the Hells Angels, and for obvious reasons too. Remember how I told you how snitches get stitches in the Hells Angels? Well, for a cop to be a part of the group and not report any illegal activities is a clear violation of their duties. But that's not at all. Even if a person isn't a cop, but has tried to become one in the past, they can never be a part of the Hells Angels. By the way, child molesters and rapists are also banned, although for very different reasons, of course. Number 10. Forget about leaving. An aspect that makes the Hells Angels so intense is how you can never leave the club. You heard that right. Once you're in for life. So one doesn't simply get up and decide that he wants to leave the Hells Angels. It's a lifelong commitment, and the only way anyone leaves is when they go against the code. I think this is why becoming a member is so hard. The Hells Angels don't want average Joes in their club who leave when things get tough. They want members who'll always be part of the gang no matter what. And if you've ever witnessed one of their funerals, there's often 100s of bikers there to pay their respect. So it's almost like till death does them apart. But some members do go AWOL, and they're dealt accordingly. The softest punishment a member could get is being stripped of their badge. But sometimes people just go missing, and I think you're smart enough to connect the dots to understand what I mean by that. Number 11, don't be absent. Attendance is compulsory, folks. Don't get caught slacking off, or it might just be your last time. Meeting up with fellow members is what makes the Brotherhood so unique and special. And unless you have a valid reason, like being dead, at the hospital or in jail, skipping an event can lead to serious repercussions. Believe it or not, failure to show up to an event is actually considered quite disrespectful, and the next time an absent member shows up, he's definitely going to get some cold shoulders. But what comes under an event? Well, there are regular weekly meetings, and members must attend. Riding is also an event, and considering how the average Hells Angels biker rides more than 12,000 miles a year, members need to make sure they have enough time on their sleeves to commit to the gang. But yeah, if someone is absent for multiple meetings without any update, members know it's best to not talk about it. Oh, wives and girlfriends are also invited to these events and are often referred to as old ladies. Number 12. No ladies allowed. Speaking of old ladies, did you know women aren't allowed to join the Hells Angels? It does kind of seem like a strange rule, but when you think about how this club was founded by a retired veteran, it makes a lot of sense. See, in the early days of the Hells Angels, women could do a lot of things. They'd join their partners during rides, show up to meetings, and even spend time with the rest of the charter. They even wore special badges to increase awareness back in the day. But the club then took more of a militaristic approach, as women were appointed in key positions to gather intel on law enforcement agencies and rival gangs. It's still unknown whether this practice is a thing inside the Hells Angels, but as of right, female riders are not allowed under any circumstances. That doesn't mean they have something against them, though. Number 13. Only ride a Harley. Members are required to ride Harleys. End of story, there are no exceptions. If a member has a thing for Ducatis or Hondas, it's best to keep that preference hidden because these guys ride nothing but Harley Davidsons. And while you're allowed to pick what model you want to ride, this is more of a tradition, as members have ridden Harleys since the inception of the club. If a member is ever caught on a different machine, forget about a warning. It's going to result in an immediate termination. There's a more technical reason why they only prefer Harleys. Number 14, be nice. It's weird how more than half of the world thinks the Hells Angels is an international outlaw motorbike group when it's actually quite the opposite. The presidents of the charter expects everyone to be nice and not just to the Brotherhood. Regular community service is compulsory for members. And while some of you might still be pissed off about how women aren't allowed to join them, they actually have a zero-tolerance approach to sexual harassment and violence against women.
You're part of our family now, and that means we'll always be here for you.
So yeah, there's more to the Hells Angels than what meets the eye, and if you ask me, I think most of them are nice people with regular lives. Number 16. No interrupting meetings. When you think of Hell's Angels and meetings, it's tempting to imagine a blown argument with aggressive men pushing and shoving to prove their point. But that's really not the case. Events and meetings are actually quite orderly, with all members on their best behavior. And why wouldn't they be? Just speaking out of turn can land a member a fine of around $100. In fact, these meetings and events are probably the most organized in the entire world. And that's because they follow a 100-year-old code. The entire group abides by Robert's Rules of Order to keep everything smooth, civil, and democratic. Plus, a proper agenda is drafted and distributed to all members several days before the meeting, so there's no ruckus or wasting time. And if anyone has any questions, they must ask them before the meeting, so it doesn't disturb any of the proceedings. But what happens if someone speaks out of turn and refuses to back down? Well, remember those punishments I told you about? Those are nothing compared to what the group does if someone disrespects a fellow brother. There are even instances of outcast members having their tattoos burnt off after losing their cool. Number 17. Forbidden to join another club or gang. By now, I think all of you have an idea of the most important thing when it comes to the Hells Angels. It's not Harleys or rides, it's loyalty. Just like how they don't want their members serving the law, they also don't want them to join another club or gang. This rule is so strict that even joining the American Motorcyclist Association is frowned upon. And if it's a rival gang like the Mongols, showing loyalty to a different group could end up being a sticky situation for any member. Don't believe me? Let me take you back in time to 2002. The Hells Angels and the Mongols ended up coming face to face in a Nevada casino, and all hell broke loose. Eyewitnesses described the clash like two armies fighting, as both these groups hate each other. It's also because members of rival gangs are always trying to dig up dirt on other clubs to get them in trouble with the law. And it's not personal or anything, it's just about territory. Number 18. The club comes first. Forget about your job, family, and social life if you ever decide to become a member. When the club calls, you must show up. It doesn't matter if you're at work or a ball game, unless you're okay with getting fined, of course. The club is kind of tricky because while it's classified as a brotherhood, members higher in the hierarchy aren't so understanding towards their brothers, and failure to show up is like a big old middle finger to the club. Dave Atwell, the highest-ranking HAMC member turned police informant, shared how having kids gave members a little leeway, but apart from that, you always had to put the club first. Atwell also shared how most of the time members would be called in by the club as backup during a fight or confrontation. I mean, just imagine for a second that you're at work and get a call from the club asking you to come fight for them. There are mentions of how 1,000s of members took over the streets, out for blood, after their president from the Frisco chapter was brutally murdered by a rival gang. But those weren't 1,000s of killers or murderers. Most of them were just ordinary citizens who wanted to ride bikes and be in a brotherhood. Number 19. Mind your seniors. The Hells Angels are super controversial when it comes to women and sex. While groupies are common among the HAMC, even batting an eye at a senior member's wife or girlfriend could get you skinned. And I'm not joking either. David shared how several members have lost their lives after trying to flirt with the old ladies at the clubhouse. But it doesn't end there. The fact that you're not even allowed to speak to your seniors as the chain of command is crazy. Members are only permitted to speak to whoever is above them, and if you're ever caught trying to get cozy with a high-ranking member, expect a fine or a beatdown. And this might be a little off-topic, but it almost seems like a huge corporate structure, doesn't it? Members get fined for not behaving, getting kicked out for not following rules, and even having to sell merchandise to pay their weekly dues. Maybe the rules are even enforced better than in some governments out there? Number 20. No dirty work, at least for members. I saved the best one for last. Such a notorious organization with no dirty work? That's a bit hard to believe, right? Well, it turns out, remember all those prospects eager to join the club? Well, to prove their allegiance, they're asked to carry out shady tasks exactly as asked. What might those tasks be? Oh, I don't know. Maybe everything that's earned them this controversial reputation in the first place. So yeah, rule number 20, always have a prospect or your dirty work. Sometimes it all just sounds like a massive pyramid scheme, but either way, it's in your best interest to mind your seniors. That's it from our side, folks. Now, so what do you think about these brutal Hells Angels rules? And have you ever heard of an outrageous rule followed by these controversial bikers that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more interesting content in the future.